November 5, 1938, Washington Afro-American, Washington, D.C. Poor little rich girl doesn't own a dress to her name. Jeni LeGon tells Afro social editor she never wears anything but slacks. By Leila Whipper-Lewis. Jeni LeGon, the bronze Cinderella of the movies, a typical poor little rich girl, doesn't own a dress to her name, but don't think it is a matter of economics. Jeni is a slacks addict. She owns plenty of smartly tailored suits of many colors. She owns a smart touring car, employs a chauffeur but prefers to drive herself, owns her own home, but she just doesn't own a dress. Evening gowns, plenty of them, yes, but not a feminine outfit for streetwear. Just never bothered to buy any. In her dressing room, deftly applying the finishing touches to her makeup, Jeni talked of her home in Hollywood, her plans for the future, and her act at the Howard Theater, where she was playing last week. It is the general consensus of opinion that Jeni's photographs do not do her justice. She is small, well-formed, and she possesses a rare, nonchalant grace of dancing that few performers can equal. Her features are piquant, and when she dons her tailored costume and skims across the stage in the steps of her routine, the effect is similar to that of a small but agile leprechaun. Jeni likes Washington and is surprised at the warm reception which people here accorded her. She was particularly impressed with the reaction of the Howard students who, when she visited the campus, swarmed about her and asked for autographs. "I don't know what I expected," she said, "but Washington is certainly a lovely place. People have been marvelous to me here." The starlet likes Hollywood and is considering the offer of another picture there soon. Meanwhile, she is preparing to do an engagement in New York. Her favorite movie stars, and the ones who have been especially nice to her, are William Powell, Loretta Young, and Ann Sothern. Jeni does not look like the usual run of performers. She is unsophisticated and entirely natural. The statements she makes are spontaneous and seemingly unpremeditated. For instance, while waiting to go on, she turned and said, as if it had just occurred to her, "I think the Afro is a swell paper. I've been reading it ever since I was little." The clothes she wears are all either tailored or formal. She says that she has promised herself some street dresses soon, but she has not yet had the time to buy them. A Hollywood tailor does most of her dressmaking. Slacks with double-breasted jackets are her favorite informal garb. When Earl Dancer, her manager, was questioned concerning her dancing, he replied that Jeni was a natural dancer and had taught herself all she knew, and that he had made only a few suggestions concerning the arrangement of her routine. On Tuesday, when Jeni visited the Afro office, all work was stopped, for the whole staff was trying to work a gadget which she had picked up in Mexico. It was a child's toy which she herself could work perfectly. It consisted of a ball not unlike the once popular yo-yo, the object of it all being to land the ball on the pedestal in one try. The editor, feature writers, society writer, and photographers all gathered around the petite star, watching with interest her dexterity at working the game. Jeni may be a movie star to some folks, but she's only a kid of 22 who likes to wear tailored slacks and play with crazy games. July 15, 1939, Washington Afro-American, Washington, D.C. Career Women of the Capital. Few women in Washington have enjoyed a career so full as that of Mrs. Harriet Gibbs Marshall of the Washington Conservatory of Music, an institution which she established 36 years ago in the nation's capital. Mrs. Marshall was born in Victoria, Vancouver Island, and is the daughter of the late M.W. Gibbs, originally of Philadelphia, and Maria A. Alexander of Kentucky, who was educated in Philadelphia and Oberlin. M.W. Gibbs was the first judge in the United States. He served as a lawyer, lecturer, and diplomat, having been appointed under 3 presidents to the positions of Register of the Land Office of Little Rock, Arkansas, Collector of Public Moneys, and finally Consul to Madagascar. He was a defender during the great career of his honored friend, Frederick Douglass, whom he accompanied at one time on a lecture tour. Mrs. Marshall was educated in the public schools and College of Oberlin. She was the first graduate from the Oberlin Conservatory of Music, graduating in piano, harmony, voice, and pipe organ. She continued her studies in Boston and Chicago and studied piano in Paris, France, with Muskowski. to events in the life of Mrs. Marshall shaped her musical career and caused her to devote her time unstintingly to the musical development of her group. During her childhood in Oberlin, Mrs. Ella Shepard Moore, the organist of the original Fisk Jubilee Singers, spent a year in the home of the mother of Mrs. Marshall, while the Reverend Mr. Moore, her husband, finished his course in theology. Mrs. Moore had with her the tiny organ that the Jubilee Singers had carried with them throughout the country and Europe. Each Sunday, the Gibbs children sat at the feet of Mrs. Moore, listening to the songs and thrilling stories of travel, how the beauty and pathos of the spirituals brought tears to the eyes of the crowned heads in Europe and quelled mobs in the Southland. Later, the full interpretation of the background of these songs came to her in the South while on a concert tour, when she and her companions were thrown from a depot waiting room. A mob surrounded them as a policeman struck a defender who rushed to their aid. The approaching train ended for them a most trying and sad experience. It was on this train, Mrs. Marshall stated, that she realized the real inspiration that gave birth to the spirituals. Then and there she decided to emphasize in all her endeavors the value of the musical expression of the colored man for himself and to America. After an extended trip on the continent, she returned to America and gave piano recitals with great success throughout the country. Turning her attention to the South, Mrs. Marshall began the first colored conservatory of music in connection with an industrial school at Cane Springs, Kentucky. It was a tremendous undertaking to secure funds for the building in which the conservatory was to be located. She gave piano recitals throughout the North, South, East, and West. Her musical appeal secured for her audiences at the University of Minneapolis, Smith College, Springfield, and other large institutions, as well as historic wealthy churches throughout the country. To the founder of the institution in Kentucky belongs the credit of having conceived the idea of establishing a similar school in Washington, where she was at this time assistant director of music in the public schools. The school opened in 1903 in the True Reformer Building, 12th and U Streets Northwest. A trustee board was appointed, consisting of commissioners of the district, Dean George W. Cook, treasurer, and others. The building, 902 T Street Northwest, now used by the conservatory, was the gift of Judge M.W. Gibbs to his daughter, and it has been dedicated to the musical development of the colored American. In 1906, she married Napoleon B. Marshall, a graduate of Harvard College and Law School, a famous athlete and veteran captain of the World War. Mrs. Marshall has surrounded herself with competent teachers from the best conservatories of America and abroad, teachers who have contributed to the excellent work and high standards of the school. Its graduates not only successfully finish a conservatory curriculum, but learn the beauty and value of their own music. Among the varied original achievements of the school are a creative art series of entertainments featuring original compositions of music and interpretive dances of colored themes, the presentation of the Last Concerto, the first drama based on the life, love, and music of the great Afro-British composer Samuel Coleridge Taylor, written by Mrs. Marshall, the expansion of a musical center which is developing a department of research and composition of colored music and which has received many copies of music donated by the leading publishers of America and 2 of London, England. Mrs. Marshall is also an author. She spent 6 years in Haiti, her husband, the late Captain N.B. Marshall, having been sent to Haiti by President Harding as attaché of the American legation at Port-au-Prince. While there, she became deeply interested in Haitian life. She made a close study of its literature and music and joined with a Haitian friend, Mademoiselle Rosina Jan Joseph, and founded an industrial school called Louvre des Femmes Haitiennes pour l'Organisation du Travail, the work of Haitian women for the organization of labor. Mrs. Marshall was vice president of this school. That the children of the United States might know of the history of the Haitian people, she studied their French histories and wrote in English a book entitled The Story of Haiti, from the discovery of the island by Christopher Columbus to the present day. Mrs. Marshall's hobby is painting in oil, watercolors, and on china. During her leisure moments, she has painted many pieces of exquisite china that have won prizes for her in exhibitions in Washington and Haiti.